So my name is Jamie Newman. I am from the Pacific Northwest, she, her pronouns. I am currently y'all's campus counselor. So my contact information is going to be on the board there, and that is my work cell, so I accept text messages if that's your preference. So my area of study is the intersection of mind-body and using nature-based interventions for mental health. So that's where I did all of my research, just to give you some background. So that being said, we're going to do a tiny practice. Everything in here is always an invitation. It's never a have to. So, listen to your insides, and if your insides say no thank you, then you don't have to do anything. And we won't be moving, so don't have to worry about that either. But if you would like, just to get a sampling of sort of some of the work that I do, let your eyes kind of wander around the room. And this is called orienting. And just notice if there's anything that your eye is sort of drawn to that feels either neutral or pleasant. So, hello. No worries, you're always welcome, it's not a problem. So when your eye finds something that's either neutral or pleasant, just rest there for a moment. And there's not a lot to look at in this room, so I apologize. And when you find that neutral or pleasant thing, let your eyes rest there, and then notice like what inside of you tells you that that thing is neutral or pleasant. So for example, I'm looking at the coffee cup that a friend of mine gave me, Christine. And so when I look at that coffee cup, the reason I know that it's pleasant is the heart space starts to feel warmer, like right under my rib cage, right? And then the next invitation would be to notice where your body is making connection with the ground. So maybe you can feel your feet on the floor or foot. And maybe you can feel your torso and your seats in the chair. Maybe your back. And just notice which one of these feels the heaviest. Where has gravity got the strongest pull? So I can feel that in my pelvis, and it feels like there's more pressure there between the seat and my pelvis. Yeah. Okay. So those are just two little practices. Orienting is something that can soothe your nervous system. Like if you're in a new space, taking a look around and saying, okay, I know where the exits are, and I see like a friendly face. So that makes me feel better. And then also, if your anxiety starts to build, sometimes just locating your, feet on the ground and back in the chair can be really soothing. Same with I know some of y'all are doing it naturally. The rocking is another very, very soothing thing. And that's gonna come into play as we talk about resilience. So I want this to be as interactive as possible, but again, no pressure, because I want to be sure I'm hitting the things that are interesting to you. So if there's a spot that you would like more information, raise your hand and feel free to ask a question or just blurt it out. You don't even have to raise your hand. So when we're talking about resilience, it's such a funny one because it's one of those things that people don't realize that they need it until it's too late. You kind of got to get knocked in the head once or twice before you're like, oh man, this is a skill I need to develop. It's not any different than basically anything about being human. I think we're sort of under this impression that we're born and we know what we're doing. Or at least we think that's what's going on with other people, and it's not true. Okay, at one point we all needed to learn how to use a spoon, we all needed to learn how to walk, we all needed to learn how to make relationships. Resilience is the same thing. So it's also not really something that you learn once and you're like, I got it. It's more of a process than a term. Does that kind of make sense? I think if I had to tell people, like, generically, one thing that I know about life is that it's sort of this, you're standing at the bottom of this conveyor belt, and like difficult things are gonna just keep coming down that conveyor belt, right? And a lot of times the first time we get hit, we just kind of stand there dripping in the muck and we're like, oh crap, this is terrible. And then we start getting better and better at bouncing back and being like, okay, I got it, and setting it down. So I know that sounds terrible, but it's really a great opportunity for growth. And the faster, and we'll talk a little more about this, the faster you learn to associate that with growing and getting better at things, the easier it will be. But it's not just you. So if you're looking around being like, how come terrible things keep happening? From what I can tell, that is just how it works. Like, one after another. Some people say it comes in threes. It just seems to be the way of the world. I don't know why that is, but it is that way. Is that kind of matching up with y'all's experience as well? Yeah, I see some like light up, like, yeah. So it's definitely not personal. Everybody has it. Some people are just really good at hiding it. Okay, so resilience is a skill that we can practice, and the first resource I have for you, so I gave you some resources, and if you're online, those are going to be in Blackboard. But I also, if you like worksheets, I love a worksheet, or you have any interest in more of this material, Linda Graham writes these really lovely books. One of them is called Bouncing Back, Rewiring Your Brain for Maximum Resilience and Well-Being. So this uses a lot of neuroscience to kind of help improve your skills. And then for the worksheet lovers, she wrote another book called Resilience, very mind-body oriented practices for building resilience. And I will leave these up here, so if you didn't get a chance or you just want to take a picture on your way out, that's totally fine. And I see you. I'm sorry, friend. Let me.
Credential?
Marriage and family therapist, MFT. Yeah. Each state, it's super bizarre, has a different way of labeling their therapist credentials. There you are. Oh, I'm sorry, ×2. Yeah, my apologies. I can get tunnel vision. 12 and 13, 11. Some of these I made back to front and some are just front. There you are. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so this first worksheet is about, and this is kind of, I think, a little limiting, but kind of the capacities that are parts of this process of building resilience. So let's talk about maybe not, if you're comfortable, not your most biggest, awfulest failure, but like low-key small. So when I started undergrad from high school, my first semester, I had a 1.2 GPA. My father called and said, "I will be on an airplane if you do not fix this." Yeah, it felt a little rough because I'd always done really well in school. That felt like a failure. Can anyone relate to that one? Yeah, the first time you kind of got socked in the stomach with a grade that you were like, what's happening? Or has anyone ever asked somebody out and gotten a no? Yeah, that can be rough. What are some other ones that you can think of, like low key? It's totally okay if you don't want to share. Please don't feel pressured.
I was about 90% through nursing school, and I have to start over day one.
Yeah, feels like a punch to the gut, doesn't it? Yeah. One thing about failing and I don't even really love that word all that much, is that there can be a lot of shame wrapped around it, right? I can see people's faces, they're like, I'm not saying that out loud. Shame thrives in the dark. So when we don't tell people the thing that we are most ashamed about, it grows. And that shame gets bigger and bigger. But when we share it and say, me too, I've done that too, there's this huge sense of relief. And we'll talk a little bit about how that's helpful. I'll give you an example, and I'm not going to say it out loud because I am still embarrassed about it, but I'd had this thing that I'd been sitting on like my whole life. We're talking about it happened to me when I was like 14. I never said a word to anybody. And I was probably 41 when I finally confessed it to my best friend. I said, I've got this one thing that I'm so ashamed of. And she said, oh my gosh, that exact same thing happened to me and I've never told you. And I sat on the curb. I remember this. I sat on the curb and I cried because I had like held that my whole life. And to have someone say, oh, I see you, was just like, I got goosebumps. Like, whew. So I promise you, whatever it is that you have not, succeeded at, probably someone else has not succeeded at it too. Happens a lot in the room where people will come in the therapy room and they'll say, this thing I'm embarrassed about and I don't tell people and I'm so ashamed. And then I want to say, like, do you realize the last 7 people just did the exact same thing? Like, whatever you're doing, it's not weird. So let's talk about some of these capacities and how you can improve on them, like deliberately improve on them. So we have persistence, creativity, emotional intelligence, grit, cognitive flexibility, thriving, agency, flourishing, adaptation, addressing social justice and equity, learning from failure and success, and overcoming adversity. Any of those land with you in a way that you're like, I'm not really sure what they mean there? And keep in mind, this isn't the best worksheet I've ever found, but. Agency, yeah. So this is what in therapy we call having an internal locus of control. So agency is being able to know what you do and don't have control over and being very clear about that. So this is an important part about resilience and is also a beautiful way to let yourself off the hook. So think about it. What do you actually have control over in life? This can be the most freeing thing or the most disappointing thing.
What we say.
Yep. Actions. You have control over your actions. What else do you have control over? Yes. I love that. So I refer to that as feelings. You have control. You do not have control of your emotions, but you 100% have control of your feelings. Yeah. Do I need to nuance that? I saw some eyes. Do you get how that's different? Okay. You also have control of your thoughts. If I told you to think about cake, what are you picturing? Chocolate, vanilla. Someone said cheesecake last time. Is it round? Is it square? Do you have multiple layers, right? You can direct your thoughts. Well, that's it, folks. That's all you can control right there. So that means everything else is going to be more of a manipulation or coercion, not control. It's both freeing and terrifying, right? So when you send a text to someone and you've worded it in a way that you think will encourage a response back, you're not actually controlling that situation, you're manipulating it. And manipulation is got a real negative connotation, but we're always manipulating things, right? Like I smile at you because I want you to smile back at me, right? I try to be kind to you because I want you to be kind to me. So but I can't control that. Ultimately, the other person gets to respond, right? So that's kind of the heart of agency, is like, I have control over this and I do not have control over that. Yeah. Are there any other questions on here regarding how these things might affect resilience?
Does it, and we don't have to get into a deep end of this, but in your field, is faith tie into anything?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That has to do with worldview. People with a spiritual practice of some kind tend to be able to make meaning of their experiences. They have an explanation kind of cooked into the system. Sometimes those can be healthy and sometimes those can be unhealthy. It really depends on how the person's been taught and interpreted and internalized that. Yeah. Yeah, that's a deep well right there. It can be difficult to unthread.
I lived in Seattle for 15 years.
Yay! Yeah. That's awesome. That's very cool. Another one that tends to draw questions is people want to know like how social justice and equity have to do with resilience. And part of that is, so it's understanding what you do, and it ties into agency a little bit. It's a systemic approach. So for example, there are some things in this world that are not equal, and we have to acknowledge that and not carry that as a fault within ourselves. So for example, I was one of the first women on a all-male Navy ship. And when I got on board the ship, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at 19, the captain took one look at me and said, "You're going to be the source of my problems." And like that really hit hard. And it took me a very long time and a lot of therapy to realize that was a systemic problem, and that he was worried about his career because this was his ship, and he perceived me as a potential source of problem for his ship. So that's a systemic issue, right? It's socioeconomic, right? There are just some things that people in certain socioeconomic classes have access to. It's gender, it's race, it's sexual identity, all of the things, they all play a part in how we interact with the world. And we need to be very cautious about how we don't feed into that, to avoid feeding into that, to create more resilience for others, as well as acknowledging when that's at play and that's not your fault. That's not something you did, right? Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. So part of resilience, I think, as you may be starting to see, is really being able to like look at what's going on and kind of unthread it and parse it apart. Helpful? Not helpful? On the right track? Okay. Yeah. So we're gonna talk a little bit about, and trigger warning, trauma. So we're gonna touch on the edges. We are not going to get knee deep in this, okay? This is definitely something you want to do with a professional, but I did want to touch on, because I think it's really important, and not everyone, therapy's not the only answer. This is on recording, so if you're a therapist, apologize, but it's not the only answer. So this is what I specialized in, so I want to nuance it. So trauma is any time something happened to you that was too much, too fast, or too soon for your nervous system. Everyone's nervous system is tuned differently. If my father were in here with me, I could shoot off a firework right by his face and he wouldn't even blink. His nervous system is not tuned. If someone stood by me and like dropped a book, you'd have to peel me off the ceiling, right? So my nervous system's a little higher tuned. I get a little keyed up fast. Little things bother me. I can't do like tags in my clothes or else I can't focus. Everybody's nervous system is tuned differently. It is something you were born with. That is not reflective of anything other than biology. Okay, so people tend to be like, why am I so sensitive? And everyone tells me to get over it. Please don't take that on. This is biological, okay? So if it was too much, too fast, or too soon for your nervous system experienced trauma to some degree or another. And there are lots of ways to deal with that. Obviously, therapy is one and my favorite. But there are some other really great ways to go about this. So processing your thoughts. Journaling about it, talking about it with somebody. Another way I like to process thoughts is through movement. So, something really difficult happens and you go back to the house, turn on some music, and you like dance it out. Or play something that reminds you and helps you like integrate. Connecting with others. So, again, shame lives in the dark. Trauma also, the trauma symptoms, they percolate in the dark. So when the urge to isolate yourself is because your nervous system is overwhelmed, that's the time you want to try to connect with someone safe. Emphasis on the word safe. Okay, you've got to look, do you remember those little exercises we did at the beginning? You've got to look internally and go, does this actually feel helpful or does this feel harmful? Right? Is my nervous system relaxing and opening up? Do I feel spacious or do I feel constriction? Your body will definitely tell you the truth. Don't compare your experience to other people. I hear this all the time. This terrible thing happened to me, but it's not that bad. Other people had it worse. No. So I'm gonna get a squirt gun and start like squirting people when they say that, like I do with my cat. So, has anyone heard the name Viktor Frankl? Okay, he's got a really beautiful book called Man's Search for Meaning, and he wrote it a long, long time ago. So man's is not meant to be taken gender-wise. It's just that's how people wrote back in the day. Viktor Frankl, yeah. So Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychologist who lost his wife, child, and life's work in a concentration camp. And he writes about his experience in that book, and he invented an entire style of therapy called logotherapy based on his experience. And he says, keep in mind, he spent a long time in a concentration camp. He said, pain is like a gas, and it fills whatever space it's in. So if a man who lost everything in a concentration camp says your pain has value, and your pain is important, it's probably important, okay? So don't diminish your experience, okay? Take care of your body. My personal favorite. I say this a lot. You were born essentially alone. Existentially, you were the only one in that experience. And you were going to die existentially alone. No one's going to go with you. People are going to come and go in the middle, right? They're going to enter your life and they're going to leave your life. That means the relationship you have with yourself is of the utmost importance. If you are abandoning yourself, that is, no one's going to be able to fix that. Feed your precious body when it's hungry. Feed it food, real food. Drink water. sleep when you're tired? How many of y'all wait till the very last minute to go to the bathroom when you have to go to the bathroom? Or you're like driving, you're like, I'll go next exit, I'll go next exit. And your body's like, I don't think this person can be trusted. Right? These are all little things that we can do to create safety in ourselves, with ourselves, right? So that if the world is falling apart, at least I know I'm going to have 3 square and a nap. You know, my body knows that, like, if I feel like the situation's crappy, I'm going to, like, get up and get out. I'm not going to sit here and be like, this is fine, all right? So don't abandon yourself. Know that it takes time. There's no timeline on getting over too much, too fast, too soon for your nervous system. There just isn't. There's no timeline on grief. There's no timeline on getting over things. Your system takes the time that it takes, okay? And it's in your system. I think this is partially where talk therapy fails a little bit. It's not necessarily something that your brain may have gotten over it, but your body might still be reacting. So just be patient with that. Just let it do what it's got to do to get undone. That's the know it'll take time. Give yourself grace. You don't, the world is going to be unkind enough as it is to you. Don't let the call be coming from inside. Does that make sense? Don't be mean to yourself on top of it. How many of y'all make a mistake and you're like, what a ding dong, or worse? Yeah. Geesh, friend. You wouldn't talk to your kids like that. You wouldn't talk to your best friend like that, right? Don't abandon yourself. Don't let the call be coming from inside the house. Don't be the most dangerous person in your life. Okay? I know there's this idea that if we're not riding our own butts, then we'll just turn into this like ball of slime and never get anything done, right? That's not true. And research tells us that people who are unkind to themselves in their self-talk and they browbeat themselves, they actually perform worse. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If I come in to have a talk and I'm like, okay, you don't know what you're talking about. You suck at this. You've said some really dumb things. Like, I can feel my system tensing up and I can feel the energy like lifting and getting really fragmented, right? How am I going to perform my best? Or if I come in and say, all right, you know what? You did the best you can last time. The people who need to hear things are going to hear things. It's out of your control. Just do your best and you've got this. Like, I can feel that. Can you feel this softening in yourself? Like, yeah, you will perform better, right? So, and don't be ashamed to ask for help. So this is where I want to remind you that you have more resources than you think. So therapy is one option. Priest, pastor, spiritual teacher, perfectly viable. A good friend who is safe and who listens well and can hold a container for you. Totally a great place to heal. Yoga. Yoga is a fantastic place to heal. The gym. Going outside and cutting wood or chopping wood or whatever the word is for it. Hiking. Oh my gosh, I get a lot of healing out of nature. Like, I can just feel my system like downshift. Yeah? Good music in the car. Dancing. There's tons of ways to heal. Don't put it in a box in a container and say, like, I can only heal if I do. Journaling, worksheets, there's so much out there. And be creative. Be curious. There is no right answer here. So when I first started teaching yoga, at the end, if you're not familiar with yoga, there's an end part called Shavasana, or corpse pose, where you're supposed to lay there and close your eyes and relax. And everything about laying in a room with a bunch of strangers while somebody walked around racked my nervous system up. And I would leave yoga class thinking, I'm doing this wrong. Why can't I figure this out? What's wrong with me? Shavasana is just not for my meat sack. My meat sack does not like that. It does not like to have its eyes closed with strangers while laying on the floor with its belly exposed. There's a lot of reasons that's uncomfortable. So if you are given a practice and it doesn't work, my friend, the practice is wrong, not you. So I abhor social media with 1,000 abhorrences. However, I will only say this once. It's a really great place to get coping skills because people are trying a lot of different kinds of things. So if you're at a loss as to what to try, by all means, get on there, type in coping skills, type in, maybe you have a diagnosis and you'd like specific assistance. There's a lot of really cool and creative things that as a therapist, I can't keep on top of it, right? There's so much material. However, for the love of all things holy, do not go on there and diagnose yourself with something. Or at least don't do that and come and see me, because I will try to jettison you out the window. I'm just kidding. I won't do that. That's not kind, and it's pathologizing, and it's not the healthiest thing in the world. And don't diagnose your friends and family either. It's not nice. So, any questions, comments, complaints, concerns about the trauma piece? Is that all making sense? Landing okay? Helpful? See a couple of, okay. So this is my absolute favorite part of this. And if you take nothing else, well, the trauma piece I'd really like you to take, but the author of this, the source material for this is Carol Dweck. She wrote a book called Mindset. And this is probably one of the bigger factors around how people bounce back for things. So if you can begin to train your brain to associate failure and setback with growth, it will make life a lot smoother. So this is often the difference between people who are just surviving in the spaces that I'm in or are thriving. How many of y'all like work out in some way, shape, or form? Like go to a gym or have some sort of movement practice, right? When you go, do you do the same thing every single day at the same intensity? Why not?
You'd only be working with part of your body.
Yeah. You're not growing, right? You're doing the same thing over and over.
You're not overuse it.
You're not overusing it. What's the sign that you're reaching the point where growth is occurring? How do you know that you're getting better?
It's easier.
In the working out sense?
Yeah, in the working out sense. You're close. That's the other side.
Stronger, or
It's harder.
It's harder.
more able, and then you have to increase.
Yeah, so it's difficult. There's discomfort when you're learning new stuff, right? Your brain is like, oh my gosh. Also, for those of you that are struggling with school, the number one thing that you can do to improve your performance is sleep. If you are not getting 6 to 9 hours of sleep, your brain is not getting the chemical wash that it needs to remember and process material. So if you think staying up a little later to study the material more is going to be helpful, good news, you're wrong, and you can go to bed. Your brain and body will thank you. So that's a side note, but yeah, it's difficult. Anytime we experience something difficult, we go an extra mile, we lift a heavier weight, we have a difficult experience, we grow. This is why it's so important that couples fight and that friends fight. Because every time we fight, it's called a rupture, and then we repair, that seam is stronger. You know that person's gonna that's an issue that y'all can come back from, that you can fight with someone and it will get better and they will stick around and stick it out with you. But if you never have that experience, there'll always be a part of you that's wondering, where's the edge on this? Right? So the normal process is a mistake is made, and the immediate feeling is, shame, embarrassment, fear, anxiety. And until we get really good at building resilience, we can get sucked into this spiral, this vortex. And that vortex is a very strong pull. So the longer you're in it, the bigger the feeling will get. So the key is to pop out of that as quickly as possible. So the second you notice, I'm feeling shame, I'm embarrassed, I'm feeling anxious, I need you to start moving towards self-soothing, whatever that looks like. So soothe yourself first, and then reevaluate how you're speaking to yourself. In the military, we call them AFGOs, another freaking growth opportunity. So this is another chance for me to get stronger, better, smarter, faster. I'm only gonna improve. I'm only gonna be better at relationships. I'm only gonna be better at school. I'm only gonna be better. Contextualize things a little bit. There are some practice practice expressions on this worksheet. So like this cultivating a growth mindset worksheet, to give you an opportunity to see ways that this might be something you struggle with. There's not a lot of secret sauce on that one. You just kind of have to practice it. What do you think? Is that lining up with your worldview? Sound about right? Okay, so strategies for building this. Everybody's going to have an edge. So the strategies here, one of the first things they talk about is, actually it's the second thing they talk about. So it's on the second page. Pay attention and focus. So everybody's got an edge, and you don't want to ride it all the time. Okay? I'm encouraging you to practice, but I am not encouraging you to be living in discomfort all the time. Right? That would suck. So the analogy I like to use, you're gonna kind of walk up to the edge, get in the feels, and then back off and soothe. Walk up to the edge, see how you do, come back and soothe. Conflict is a really great place to practice this. How many of y'all are not a fan of conflict? Yeah, most people are not, right? So with your partner or with someone that you love and trust, all right, I can feel myself getting elevated. I can see we're getting into it. Practice calling a timeout, walking away, taking a lap around the house, scrolling through Instagram a little bit, maybe working out. I like to go and do squats in the bathroom. I've got quads of steel, people. Every time I get into a conflict, I go hide in the bathroom, right, and do a couple squats until I feel less activated, and we come back in. So practice coming up to the edge. What does that feel like? I'm going to walk away from the edge and soothe myself. This will build your confidence because you'll feel this a little more agency, right? A little more of an ability to control. So these situations don't spiral and you get caught in that vortex of awfulness, right? Look at your grades, close the laptop, go soothe, come back. What can I do? Can I talk to my professor? Can I do something extra? What did I miss? At work, you get corrected at work, right? Somebody yells at you. Ooh, I gotta go to the bathroom. Go to the bathroom, cry, self-soothe. come back and say, okay, I hear you're frustrated with me. What can I do better? We are never our best selves when we're most activated, and I don't want you to live in that space. That's not healthy. You can't take a car out and run it at the highest revs and expect it to last. It's just not. You can't do the hardest workout every day. So in therapy, it looks a little bit like this for me. So I'll come in, I'll try something new, I'll try one new thing. And then after the session, I'll come out, I'll take a couple laps, I'll take a few deep breaths, I'll do some stretching. How did that feel? Do I have space to try again? Okay, back and forth. You want to learn how to rock yourself back to safety and get that confidence that you can do that. You can almost always go to the bathroom. That's one I use a lot. People think I have digestive issues. If I start to get overwhelmed, to the bathroom I go, because I can walk in there and soothe myself. Yeah. So, to the front, engage socially, again, connecting with other people. Shame lives in the dark. Share what you're experiencing. Be self-aware and practice self-care. I cannot say this enough times in enough ways. Please tend to that relationship you have with yourself. I taught a class on relationship skills, and if you look at the board, these are like relationships with other people, but they also really apply to your relationship with yourself. You know, are you communicating clearly with yourself? Oh, my body's hungry, my body's tired. I hear you. I'm going to do something about that. I'm getting mixed signals. I need to go figure out what that means. Are you practicing courage with yourself? Are you being brave and trying something new? Are you being curious about your own experience? What does it mean when I get a grapefruit in my throat? What does it mean when it feels like there's static in my chest? What does it mean when my knee hurts? Are you practicing humility? And please don't confuse this with, this can be a struggle for people. They get confused about the difference between being selfless and being humble. I don't want you to be selfless. You will not be able to care for others. I see a lot of people in caretaking fields and people fields. You will not be able to maintain that if you don't get a solid self-care game now. You've got to be continually pouring into the cup because you're constantly pouring out. So learn really quick what your signals are that you're if you're getting impatient with people and you're getting irritated with them, more needs to go into the cup, right? So being humble, I got a little off the rails there, is not giving until you drop. To be resilient, it's kind of like with muscles. A short and tight muscle doesn't have a lot of space to contract, so you don't get a lot of power. You want to lengthen the muscles and loosen them so you can get contraction. You want to pour into yourself so that you have space to create the power you need to go forward in your life. Yeah. And you can feel that, right? Like when I'm being kind to myself, there's spaciousness, where if I'm being mean, I contract inside. Committing to practice. Resilience, my friends, it's not a one and done. We all got to get better about it, myself included. You know, I got feedback the other day and I was like, oh, I wish I could crawl into a hole. I was like, okay, what do I tell people to do? Right? So that's that being aware and practicing self-care. I really love journaling for this, or meditation, or prayer. These are all ways, spending time in nature that we can take a moment to notice what worked and what didn't. Another tool that I didn't bring here, but I should have, there's a really fun, if you're not a big journaler, it's called the 5-minute journal, and it has just a short morning and evening prompt And I love it. And I know it's repetitive, but it gives you a chance to say what you're grateful for, what would make the day good, and then at the end of the day, like what went really well and what you need to work on, right? So that's all part of awareness and self-care. And then finding meaning. So you mentioned this. It's really important to put this in perspective, right? Is this thing that's upsetting that I experienced, is it going to bother me 5 years from now? Now, sometimes the answer to that is yes, and that's okay. That's the time to get help, right? But is this correction from my boss? Is that I went to the wrong building and walked into a class and everyone looked at me? Is that going to matter 5 years from now? Nah. Not at all, right? The very first time I taught yoga, I'm really into anatomy, and I didn't realize this. I was teaching at a CrossFit, but probably about half of the students were doctors, like MD doctors. And so I'm like thinking I'm getting the anatomy pretty good, right? And I noticed they were smiling, and I was like, oh, they like me. Like, this is going really well. And then at the end of the class, to ice the cake, there's a part after a shavasana where teachers often will say, curl onto your right side and curl into the fetal position. I said, curl into the fecal position. And at the end of class, so everyone like laughed. So much for everyone's like peaceful end moment of class, right? Everyone's like cracking up. And like one guy in particular was just doubled over. He was like, I stuck through all the anatomy stuff, but that was just too much. And he was like doubled over and laughing. And like we laughed about it because I was like, take it light, be easy. And I went to my car and I bawled, like sobbed my eyes out and thought, I'm never teaching yoga again. You can forget this. And I appreciate the empathy so much. Y'all's faces really warm my heart. Yeah, it was terrible. Like, and every time I think about it, I get one of those shame washes, right? But I taught for another 15 years. And I can tell I'm getting tears in my eyes only because I'm appreciating the empathy, but like it doesn't have the sting that it used to, you know? And that's a skill that we build. We get to like, okay, we make mistakes. In 10 years, it didn't matter, and it became a funny story.
Was that something you did for a long period of time?
Yeah.
Use that word?
Oh no, I only did that one time. Woo! I never said that again. And I will say curl onto your right side or your left side, whichever you prefer, and curl into the fetal position. Always take a breath and go, which word is it again? So yeah, that's funny. It does still stick a little bit, but not to that degree. Okay, so the last worksheet, if you do nothing else, I really like this one a lot. Creating your own life story. So there's a trick in therapy. It's essentially called memory reconsolidation. Every time you remember something, you rewrite it. You're getting free, and I'm telling you one of our big secrets, so that'll be $200 from each of you. No, I'm just kidding. Memory reconsolidation is the process by which every time we recall an event, we change it a little bit. And you can use this to your advantage. So this is why I love this worksheet. If you think about a time that you failed, and the first time you think about it, your brain is going to be doing its reptilian thing and focusing on where you sucked, right? But if you lay that story out again and look at all the places that you did the best you could, that you reached for resources, and you do that multiple times or one time and reread it, your memory will eventually color that picture in a way that you will remember all the ways that you were resilient. So that is literally what a lot of therapy is. You may never have to go now. So do yourself a favor and think about that time that came to mind when you were thinking about your failure, and think about like, hey, I got halfway through. I got better at being a student. I figured it out. I learned what the resources were. I never said fecal in class again, right? And the more you think about that, you know, notice again in your body that like the lightness and the sense of like, oh, I can do this. You are so much stronger and so much more capable than you think you are. The only way you will find that out is by screwing it up. And if you're not screwing it up, you're not pushing your edges and trying hard enough, right? I was in a training this last week and it was just magical. And one of the things that the practitioners said every time we broke out to practice, they said, I want you to make 3 mistakes. You need to make 3 mistakes. And we would get done and the teacher would say, I only counted 1 mistake. I need you to try again. Try to screw it up harder. Right? What a good feeling. What freedom. So I want you every day to make 3 mistakes. Okay? Make 3 mistakes, overcome them so you can see what you are truly capable of. It is beyond your wildest imagination, I promise you. You will surprise yourself every time what you can bounce back from. Okay, so we're winding down towards the end, and I want to be really respectful of your time. Is there a way that I can support you? Any questions, comments, complaints, concerns?
I have a question.
Yes. No, never apologize.
Um,
Well, unless you're wrong.
This is my wife. We were trying to think of the name of this model. Are you familiar with Erickson's growth and development?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm an old graybeard, and I stay in this space a lot more than I was when I was their age.
Mm-hmm.
To do any of this, you first have to enter that space and understand.
Yes.
So how do younger people become self-aware quicker? You don't want to do it when you're 36 like me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great
Like,
question.
you have to be able to recognize that this is real. You have to enter that space.
And we have a 16-year-old we're trying to guide.
Yeah, I get where you're going. So one piece of that puzzle is prefrontal cortex development.
Exactly.
So have you all heard this prefrontal cortex situation? It doesn't come online until 21 to 25, and there's really not a whole lot you can do to force that. Yeah. So I wish I had better news on that front, but initially you gotta, and you don't want to force people to something because it will short circuit their process, right? And it also, when we jump in and save people, we are actually kind of screwing them over because we're saying, I know better than you and I don't think you can do it. So we've got to let them fall on their faces. The other piece is to model it. So using a lot of, I'm noticing my interior experience is this, I need to care for myself in this way and go do it. I don't think we give people enough examples. How many parents, and this is, if your parents were not this way, please don't run with this, okay? But like, how many people's parents really modeled selflessness? Like, no, okay. My parents were like always giving, and so I thought I have to always be giving. Maybe society's telling you always have to be giving. That is not a good idea because it perpetuates this idea that we have to give until the wheels fall off. You have to fill your cup in order to give, and you have to retreat and pull back and say, I trust that you can do this. If you need me, I'm over here. But I've got to care for myself. You guys, another way that y'all can do this in your personal relationships that's really lovely. All of my therapist friends and I do this with each other. So say I've had a tough session and I need to blow off some steam. So I'll call or I'll video my friend and I'll say, if you've got space for this, keep going. If not, shut the video off now and I'll blah, 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 blah. Or, hey, do you have room for this? Do you have space? I've got a thing. We don't want to dump on people without asking if they have room for it, which gives them the opportunity to say, you know, I don't think I do have space. And it's the same with your children, right? Like, my friend, I love you and I see that you're struggling right now, and I really, you know, I've given you some tools. Go try those. I don't have space right now. You know, maybe dad does, maybe grandma, grandpa, somebody else does. Yeah, or one of your friends might. Come back and tell me how that went. Yeah. Is that helpful? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The parent issue's a touchy issue. That's a hard line to like not. Society's being way unkinder on all of you than you realize. Nobody's acing this, okay? Nobody's like walking through this and is like, I've got life figured out. The parental pressure is enormous. The perfectionist pressure is enormous to do it right, to look the best, to never let them see you sweat. I'll tell you one last little story. So I used to work in a natural foods market in a really high-end area, like super bougie. And everyone that came through the line was either a professional chef for somebody who had more money and didn't have to shop for themselves, or someone who was just succeeding at life. Gorgeous, beautiful, you know, name brand, everything people. And I always ask people, you know, hey, how are you doing? And Seattleites are really honest. And it was a really busy day. The line was out to here, and this, you know, gorgeous woman with a diamond the size of my head, I swear. She like slammed her stuff down and she said, you know what? And she looked down the line and she said, I bet every one of you thinks I'm doing just fine. I bet you think I'm doing just fine. And I was like, this is not going well. And she said, my partner just asked for a divorce after 25 years and I am a disaster. I'm a wreck and I feel miserable and nobody can tell. And she started to cry. And I had to get her through the line. But what was beautiful was that she was standing, like trying to organize her purse, and as people came through, they all went to her and like either grabbed her hand and said, I'm sorry, or like gave her support. People are struggling and they're just hiding it. And the biggest grace that we can extend each other is to be authentic about what we're experiencing so that someone else has an opportunity to say, oh God, I thought it was just me. You know, I thought I was the only one. You were not the only one. That's where that social connection comes in. And since you like psychology, check out Winnicott. It's good enough, parent. Winnicott, Winnecott. Yeah, good enough. Because that's all you really have to be, is good enough. All right. Well, I really appreciate you spending time with me. Thank you so, so much. You're stronger than you think you are. You got this. And when you don't, reach out for someone who loves you. Please do not forget to scan your little QR code so that we can track that you were here. If you want to take pictures of these books, I also have some of my other favorite resources on the table there and my contact information. I'm super, super busy, but I'm working on figuring out how to get in some drop-in time. So it might be better to text me and schedule. And if you want to see me as a therapist, there's an intake that's an hour and a half, and then we do like a formal process. If you just need to come in and blow off some steam, just say, hey, I need to come in and blow off some steam, and let me know, and I will make some space for that too. Okay? All right, much love and be well.